Well, good evening. It's good to be back together with you again today. We pick back up again today in the middle of Job's response to Bildad. Bildad was one of the three friends who's come to comfort Job in his suffering, but really what he ends up doing is only just pouring coals into his lap, really, by asserting even more forcefully than Eliphaz that Job must have sinned greatly in some way. Otherwise, God wouldn't be punishing him like this. So Job continues to plead his case that they're wrong. And now he shifts his plea from his friends to God. As we begin chapter 10, we hear Job wondering why God is treating him this way. Job could see one human treating another human this way, but not God. Why would God treat anybody this way? Yeah, man has fallen into sin, yet we're still God's handiwork. And Job wonders why God would be unwilling to forgive him, if that's really the case. In other words, guilty or not, it seems to Job that God has decided to punish him as though he had committed some terrible sin. He can't even sacrifice. He doesn't have anything left to offer. Once again, Job pleads that rather than torment him, that God would just leave him alone and to live out what little time he has left in the misery that he's in. Basically, Job just feels like he can't win. If he has indeed sinned, as he's accused of, well, then he has no hope before God. And if he has not sinned, as he maintains, he still doesn't have any hope before God, because God's hand seems to be against him, and God is all powerful. So what can Job do? He can't do anything to defend himself. Of course, Job's only hope is the arbiter that he mentioned in the previous chapter, the seed promised to Adam and Eve. Our hope is the same. We have no hope outside of Jesus, the seed that God sent, just as he had promised. We move on then to chapter 11. In chapter 11, Job's friend Zophar begins to speak. Now, Zophar has no sympathy, and Zophar has absolutely no tact. Zophar only knows the law, basically the natural religion of man. He doesn't appeal to a revelation from God, as Eliphaz had, or some great example of the forefathers as Bildad had. He just arrogantly claims to know that Job has absolutely done something heinous. He lambasts and he insults Job as he calls Job's pleas babble, and even puts words in Job's mouth by saying that Job claims that his doctrine is pure. Well, Job never said that. Actually, Job has admitted that he's a sinner. He simply wants to hear he just simply wants a hearing with God about his present situation. Well, that in itself is a problem, but it's certainly not the problem that Zophar is accusing Job of. Zophar has a very simple message. If you want to change your situation, change your behavior. That actually kind of appeals to our ears, doesn't it? Can you hear yourself telling your children something like that? I certainly can. But it completely misrepresents what's going on here. Job is being attacked by the devil, and within limits, God is allowing it to happen. Zophar's theology would never take something like that into account. So Job replies. His reply is long. It's 3 chapters long, 2 of which we're going to read today. Job claims that even though he is now the laughingstock of the land, he still has wisdom and knowledge of his own. Well, that's for sure. In fact, we find that Job's wisdom far exceeds that of his friends. Job notes that those who are at ease, well, they hold misfortune in contempt. But misfortune can be around the corner for any person. Job asserts that God does not punish the wicked. That's a complaint we hear a lot today, right? Look at all the things that everybody's doing. They just get away with it. God doesn't punish them at all. Why is he picking on me? Well, that's effectively one of the arguments that Job is making as well. I guess to summarize it, Job asserts that human suffering is beyond human control, and there's no direct correlation between righteousness and ease or sinfulness and suffering. Simply put, God's in control and we're not. Job speaks of God as the originator of both pain and pleasure. Notice also how Job ascribes great powers to God. He has this long laundry list of these things that God alone can do. Well, having found no help in his friends, Job now turns his appeal to God. In chapter 13, Job's going to begin addressing God. The first couple of verses are still a leftover from chapter 12, but then Job begins to address God. Job's sense of suffering and loss is so great that he wants an audience with God himself. We feel that way a lot of the times, don't we? Job's friends had presumed to speak for God, but what they said didn't reflect reality. It just didn't jive. And Job lays out his reality. And even in the midst of Job's reality, he still places hope in God. Even if he loses his life, his hope remains in God. Job understands firsthand the frustrations of the world. Job's dealing firsthand with the pain and suffering caused by sin. Even if it's not some specific sin on his part, still he knows that the pain and suffering that he's dealing with is a result of sin in general. Still, he feels as though God has become his enemy, and he wonders why. And that's kind of where we leave Job at the end of our reading today. He spoke great words of hope, but he also has this feeling of utter frustration and helplessness. When we return tomorrow, we're going to hear the frustration, we're going to hear, the frustrated end of Job's response to Zophar, and then we'll begin another round of comments by Job's friends, beginning again with Eliphaz. May God be with you and bless you. I pray that your day is, that you have a good day, that you have opportunity to share God's love with someone else as well. I look forward to joining you again tomorrow.